are my babies. Here, I'll put you up like this.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and roll. I don't know if audio's on.
Okay.
Now, hang on.
Hi, everybody. I have Fluffy over here, and I have Chocolate here. And you can see they really have furry winter coats, perfect for Christmas time. And they're getting bigger and fluffier and bigger and fluffier, and I love them so much. And I hope that all of you out there, that your pets are healthy and fluffy also, and that it's wonderful to be back again with them, with us, with you, and with this exploration of this world of so much mystery and phenomena and agitation that we seem to be increasingly in anymore. And since last Wednesday, I did a Phenomena Radio broadcast the next night on the Thursday after our YouTube channel get together. And it was with John Greenwald, who is the creator of the internet's Black Vault. That describes itself as, quote, the largest privately run online repository of more than 2 million pages of declassified government documents anywhere in the world. Every document was obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, also known as FOIA. One of John's goals, all the way back to 1996, was to get as many documents that he could on the highly classified American CIA program called MKULTRA. Its bottom line, mind control. Today, in 2018, he is still in what he calls a battle with the CIA to get more MKUltra documents. MKUltra was officially sanctioned by the CIA in 1953, and that is 65 years ago. That code name was given to, quote, illegal program of experiments on human subjects by the CIA. The agency experimented on humans to develop drugs, alcohol, tattoo ink, and other methods for interrogations and torture in order to weaken the individual to force confessions through mind control, close quote. One MKUltra document John has received is dated December 6, 1956, and describes one CIA goal this way, quote, the production of amnesia, which could be regularly and successfully produced in humans through indirect, secret, or concealed induction methods that can include stimulations from mechanical, visual, auditory drugs, chemicals, gases, aerosols, or hypnosis, close quote. Regular and successful amnesia by secret methods of chemicals and hypnosis sounds are like the memory wipes that John Levine described in his strange internet blog about being a secret astronaut. Is it possible that in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, during the evolution of NASA's space programs, that the CIA was actively controlling leaks with MKUltra methods? Was John Levine on the MKUltra list of people to be monitored and memory wiped, as he claims? Could his now 71-year-old mind be damaged from forced amnesias and other mind controls in a program such as MKUltra? Or is he only fantasizing for reasons unknown? I told you in last week's YouTube broadcast that I would keep investigating some of the big puzzles in the John Levine story. One puzzle is, did any Saturn V rockets launch from above ground and return to Vandenberg Air Force Base northwest of Los Angeles in the early 1970s, as he says happened on Apollo 20? When you read Vandenberg space history, you will find this sentence, quote, in 1972, the year that Apollo 17 went to the moon, allegedly NASA's last official launch, Vandenberg Air Force Base was selected as the West Coast Space Shuttle launch and landing site, but it was never used as such, close quote. No further explanation. What changed in 1972? That was the year of the alleged Apollo 17 mission to the moon, and John Levine says gray aliens on that mission warned humans not to go back to the moon. I have learned there is no historic evidence, though, of any above-ground Saturn V launches to the moon from Vandenberg Air Force Base in the 1970s or ever. Now, further, John Levine said that he and Apollo 17 astronaut Eugene Cernan were watching the Earth set on the moon's horizon when a gray alien drove up in a small vehicle and interrupted their watching the Earth set. I have learned that there are certain places on the moon known as libration zones in which the Earth could be seen to go up and down by a few degrees every once in a while each month. But where Apollo 17 landed on the moon in August 1972 was near the Taurus Littrow crater, right in the center of the moon side that faces Earth. And this is a photograph in which Cernan and one of the rovers is there on the moon. This is not a libration zone, so astronomers would say that no one at Apollo 17 could have seen an Earth set. Well then, on December 6th, just very recently, I received an email about John Levine's DD-214s and other documents from this retired Navy captain on your screen, Mark Allen Wood, who is now 69 years old in southern Florida. Mark Wood has helped me with military and geophysical research for the past 5 years. Captain Wood had 25 years working as a U.S. Navy airborne navigation, search, and rescue and anti-submarine warfare experiencer. The next year, he had training in overwater navigator qualifications in celestial navigation, and after being designated as a naval flight officer, was assigned to a U.S. Navy PC-3C squadron at Moffett Field in California. For the next 25 years, Mark flew over 3,000 flight hours in 3 P-3 squadrons as a mission commander and tactical coordinator, ultimately becoming both an executive officer and commanding officer of 2 U.S. Naval Air Reserve units. In his December 6th email to me, Captain Mark Wood wrote about the strange Levine story. Quote, I am going to dig into everything I can to prove this is either something that should be avoided or come up with something that will independently verify his story. So far, I've studied the 3 DD-214s that you have at your Earth files and the website about John Levine, but they don't show any record of him having ever gone through any type of military flight training, Navy or Air Force or Army. He was a radio tech in Vietnam for a unit that monitored VC low-power radio transmissions. He wears glasses. At that time in the military, there was no LASIK surgery, so you couldn't be a pilot. Even with contact lenses, you couldn't be a pilot. So how did he fly an airplane, let alone something like the TR-3B that he has said that he has flown? Now, he got off active duty in February of 1969, that we're talking about John Levine, after serving in Vietnam as an E-4, that is equivalent to a third-class petty officer in the Navy. He then applied to Navy Officer Candidate School, which starts you out as an E-5 and then discharges you. Now, between being discharged from the Air Force in February of '69 and starting OCS in September of 1974, we're talking about 67 months. So let's assume that John Levine started at USF in Florida as soon as he could get back into the school, and that means he would have graduated with a 4-year degree. for his officer candidate school by the spring of 1973. If you look at his basic incoming FBI security check, he worked for things like Allstate Insurance and Montgomery Ward in 73 to 74, and that fits in with his enlistment for OCS by the September of 74. But explain to me, when he went to the moon on Apollo 17, if he was doing all that in 73, 74. More importantly, if he was a student at USF earning a 4-year degree, how did he spend a few years training to be a crew member in an Apollo capsule and also be a co-pilot in the lunar module? If you look, Linda, at the technical requirements to be selected to be an astronaut, even back during the Apollo days, you had to have a degree in science or engineering, be a military pilot, have thousands of hours of flight time in high-performance aircraft, and most of these guys who were and became astronauts had combat flight experience in either Korea or Vietnam. So, perhaps John Levine learned how to fly performance jets and got his PhD during his summer breaks, and that is the naval captain being looking a little askance at this. Well, let's now go into a broader context. On the screen is a cover of something that was called Project Horizon. This is dated March 20th, 1959. It was described by Army Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso in his 1998 important book, The Day After Roswell. I met Colonel Corso in Roswell, New Mexico at the 50th anniversary of the 1947 UFO crashes. It was the same time his book was released, The Day After Roswell, that contains this cover and a reprint that he got the okay, unclassified. And what was its goal? To establish a lunar outpost on the moon. Then, this is page 276 in the appendix of Colonel Corso's book. And this was a proposal that was written by Arthur G. Trudeau, Army Lieutenant General and Chief of Research and Development in the Pentagon, and the general that Colonel Corso had worked with in the 1960s about specifically UFOs, ETs, their advanced technologies, and American efforts to retrieve and back engineer those technologies. Well, in this proposal, it reads, the total extent of the military applications which may evolve after establishment of the initial outpost on the moon is a function of variables which require operational and/or technical evaluation beyond the scope of this study, meaning Horizon. But it says that what it might call for will be National Security Council type evaluation. For one, an evaluation of the actual or potential threat to the continued operation of this lunar outpost and the policy on countering the threat. And that the evaluation of the significance of lunar operations will be within this broader framework of total national defense. Well, Colonel Corso told me the threat that was referenced in that Horizon project back in 1959 was an alien presence on the moon, as there was on Earth, and it was not entirely friendly, and that the people that Colonel Corso and others were working with knew that, and that therefore the March 20th, 1959 Project Horizon was a military operation to assess the extraterrestrial threat and try to counter it. On the last page of his books afterward, Colonel Corso wrote, quote, I understood that we were fighting a Cold War with the Soviets and a skirmish war with extraterrestrials. A skirmish war. We have been hearing various people talk about skirmishes between our planes and UFOs in the recent year. He said, I believed that the UFO intentions were and still are hostile. And I believe that we took the steps then, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, necessary to develop the weapons that can blunt their threat. In fact, the U.S. military now in 1997 has better, more accurate, and more powerful weapons for killing UFOs than were deployed in the movie Independence Day, close quote. Well, back on that July 1997 day in Roswell for the 50th anniversary, Colonel Corso told me in great detail that he had read An Alien Harvest, the book about animal mutilations, that when I explained that law enforcement had told me at the beginning of my television production that the perpetrators of the animal mutilations on this planet that are bloodless and trackless are creatures from outer space, that Colonel Corso agreed. In fact, he has a large section in his book about extraterrestrials mutilating animals, and that our government back then, when he was working in the Pentagon with General Arthur Trudeau, they considered this to be one of the threats of a non-human intelligence interacting with our planet and on the moon. Now, on December 7th, I received more comments that give an even different perspective, perhaps, to John Levine and many of these questions about dealing with an alien presence here on the moon, Mars, and throughout this solar system. This source works in naval special operations. That's as much as I can say. He is active now. I have met him. He has had face-to-face encounters with non-humans. I was interested that he chose to send me this information in the context of who is John Levine and what is the truth about his being in any secret astronaut training program or having been on any secret astronaut missions. So here is a military operative for the Navy. Now, quote, I can understand why you and other people have concerns about Levine. I am sure that your presentation on Coast to Coast, which was 2 weeks ago, would have aroused interest on this subject. Just this evening, which was December 7th, I'm in a different time zone, and with a group of people, we were discussing certain isotopes and metals. As we did so, it triggered in me, quote, repressed or wiped out memories regarding what I saw and experienced during the encounter in Antarctica, as I have related to you, meaning to me. The recall is usually triggered by certain words or images during conversations so distant from the event. It is a very interesting aspect. The only ones to experience this type of recall, interestingly enough, in my work, were some of my deceased longtime right-hand partners, like a physicist who was a close colleague, not the rest of my team members, to the best of my knowledge. Why? I have no idea. With respect to John Levine's memory, certainly it could be that it was selectively altered or wiped. It could also be manipulated either by the encountered beings, most likely if he indeed has encountered alien beings, or by manipulation through things like MKULTRA by the Department of Defense. There was technology that was available to the DoD at the time in the 1970s, and Apollo 17 was 1972. I am told that it was not very selective, however. Since I don't have hands-on experience with the technology of the 1970s or 1972, to contrast with what is available today or what was available to me during the last 20 years, I cannot attest as to the selectivity of those mind manipulation tools back then. Today, it is a different story. Therefore, Linda, you have an uphill task in order to verify his statements. We are aware that encounters with alien beings increased in incidence subsequent to 1972. This is the Navy military operative continuum. Please also note that the media falsely alleged that Russia lost interest in competing with the US by 1972. Instead, the truth is the Russians focused heavily on space stations development ahead of the US then. That was really when the race began, and then came joint missions later, after the Russians wanted to compete and get ahead of us. Roscosmos was planned well before funding from the US came about, which was accelerated during the Ronald Reagan administration. Remember who his VP was during Perestroika. Linda, there was lots of wheeling and dealing in and for space back then. And I'm sharing this tonight to show how complex the facets are that have been provoked by the John Levine reports. It is as if pieces here and there are actually showing us that there was bigger truths having to do with the United States realizing that there was an alien presence on the moon, that they knew there was an alien presence on the Earth, and that there were covers. Covers were being made in all directions, and that Project Horizon was being talked about in the Department of Defense, in the Pentagon, by General Arthur Trudeau, handpicked by General Eisenhower to be the first head of research and development for the Army because of their relationship in World War II. They knew and trusted each other. And the Central Intelligence Agency that had been brought together by Harry Truman on September 18th, 1947, specifically, even though it doesn't say that, it was because the Truman administration was running scared about what were the intentions of the UFOs and the alien intelligence. And so in that mix, as we come up into the 60s and the 70s, many of us, for myself especially, I can speak that in the early 1980s, after I had done the work on the animal mutilations, I was told somewhere in that 82, 83, 84 time period when I was trying to do the project for Home Box Office that I've talked about here before, I was told that in the last Apollo mission 17, that we were warned not to come back to the moon. So there are pieces and facets. MKULTRA by then was very sophisticated in terms of being able, as we showed in that document, to selectively cause amnesia in human brains, and that they were looking for ways that they could control minds, erase minds that might be involved with some kind of sensitive mission. So all of these pieces add up to a very complex fabric that the public of the public Americans did not know was going on behind the scenes. And in all of this is the strange idea that there might have been 3 more secret missions, 18, 19, and 20, that would have been operated, what? Because we got a warning on the moon from an alien intelligence in Apollo 17, in 1972 not to come back, and that was a gauntlet that was thrown down, and the United States then really wanted to go to the moon, and that Project Horizon, the idea that we would get the first lunar base on the moon in that period, 50s, 60s, going into 70s, ahead of Russia, and all of that complexity was working. Could there have been somebody who didn't have a lot of pilot training, who might have been selected because they had other talents like telepathy, that went to the moon in some other completely different kind of vehicle, that wasn't a Saturn V launch, which you could never hide, 363 feet high, taking off in this huge, huge, huge thrust of flame? But maybe in 1972, at the time of Apollo 17 up to 1976, maybe the United States had other vehicles, perhaps borrowed by something else, to go to the moon, maybe even to Mars. Really secret missions. And today, in 2018, what are we seeing? NASA headlines: we are going to put a permanent base on the moon in the next, by 2035 or 2040. What is it that we know now that we didn't know then? Do we have new confidence in allyship with friendly other intelligences that might be part of the skirmishes that the Navy military operative says have gone on, and that some of the wording in some of the documents talk about skirmishes that we have had with something that is not friendly? And now we're back into that discussion that we have been through 2 or 3 times now on my Earth Files YouTube channel. Who are our allies out there in the cosmos? Who are neutral and who are not friendly? How long will it be before all of us in the human family are given the respect to have that explained to us, so that we can stand up with knowledge, be stronger, and not be so easily manipulated by forces that we have not understood because we have been denied the knowledge that they are here? I feel, having talked with Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso, for talking with some of the whistleblowers that have been coming to me for the last couple of years with amazing firsthand encounters, that they are not afraid. I don't feel fear. And the one thing that I hope that out of these reports that I am trying to share with you on my Earth Files YouTube channel, there have been so many secrets, and that maybe in the 50s and the 60s leading up to the 70s, our government had a valid reason to be concerned. But today, I think that when Colonel Corso and some of the other people in the whistleblower category have said to me, we can take on UFOs, we can handle them in a skirmish, maybe we're tested. Maybe the government has allies and we know that we've got firm technology and therefore we have nothing to be afraid of. But what we are in huge need of is opening up this whole story, letting everybody know what the real truth has been about secret space programs that maybe had to produce false narratives, secret astronauts, all kinds of things in order to accomplish secret missions, because the world was being kept in the dark. So, as we are now only about 2 to 3 weeks from New Year's Day 2019. Let's hope. You know, I've got those bets out there that we would get that headline, "We're not alone in the universe," by New Year's Day 2019. So I got about 2 weeks and counting. Maybe. Who knows what will happen? But if that big headline is not there by New Year's Day, maybe it's going to come in 2019, a year that seems to be stacking up by many directions as being one in which there will be a lot of agitation. Maybe more volcanoes, more earthquakes, more severe weather, while our government and other governments are trying to come to some kind of terms in their relationship. And maybe in all of this in 2019, maybe a rocky road, that it will finally be decided by all the nations that all of us deserve the truth, and that all of these men and women who have been in astronaut corps in the United States and Russia and China and Japan and on, that everybody can be told the truth about what do we know is helping us, what do we know is just neutral, and what do we know about where there may be skirmishes and why. And on that note, Lori, I would love to get feedback and questions from our YouTube audience.
So the first thing is, people want to know, what are the blinking lights outside of your window?
Well, let's see. Brad, my computer tech, is here. And let's see which window. Is it back here?
Yeah,
Oh, I see. You know, he saw that before we started, and he thought maybe it was a traffic light. And he tried to go to the window with black gaffer's tape and put it, because he said, you're going to be flooded with people saying, is there a green pulsing UFO outside your window? Now, it's really interesting. He thought he had it covered, and we're pretty sure, we think it was maybe a traffic light. But here, Lori, this is really interesting. It looks big. And remember, when I had that white fog that came in on the upper bookshelf, which is a little higher than where we are now, that people were asking about, what are those lights out there? Well, you have to go an entire mile to get to what is called Tramway Boulevard. It goes off on an angle from up here, and where that, it's strange, isn't it, Brad? Brad is helping me now with this, with the camera. That the green light we thought was a traffic light, and he put tape on there so that it wouldn't be confusing. But now, Brad, is it a traffic light, or what kind of light is it? If it were a traffic light, we would see it change from green to some other color. So now, Lori, it is a mystery. I will try to find out. I believe it's over on Tramway Boulevard. And so everybody will get, it is an entire mile away from my office.
Oh, perhaps
Now look at it.
Christmas
It's gone.
lights.
Now black has gone over it. Yeah, that's very interesting. That would be something we have not seen when we were doing the YouTube channel from that other camera in a different angle. Now we're in a different angle. And so as far as I know, everybody, it is a terrestrial traffic light on Tramway Boulevard, a mile away from my office. And we will, as we go through each week doing this show, we will see if that is, we'll call it Linda's Earthfile YouTube green traffic light.
The first question we have is from Divine Energy. What was the main mission of the John Levine mission?
I don't know. I really don't know a lot about that. Somebody asked that, before? And I've been concentrating on so many other things. I don't know.
The next next question from our friend Stephen is, does Linda believe some kind of MKUltra program is still going on to this day?
I do, and so does John Greenwald. John and I have had a lot of talks about this, and when we did the 2-hour Phenomena Radio last week, it is this sense that the reason that he is in what he calls my fight with the CIA. Here are bullet points. 2004, John got 4 CD-ROMs after struggling from 1996 onward to 2004 as having the Black Vault with wanting to do everything legally above board, filing FOIA reports, that asking for MKUltra documents. And from the 90s to 2004, John was denied. And suddenly in 2004 come these 3 CD-ROMs that had some MKUltra documents. And then he has a revelation by a researcher that the CD-ROMs do not represent all of the documents listed in the list of content. So he started filing to get all the MKUltra documents that were in their own content indexes that were missing on the CD-ROM. In October 2018, a little more than a month ago, at the end of October, he got a notice that they were closing the file and that he had absolutely no appeal right because the CIA had basically had enough of his inquiries. And he got in touch with 2 FOIA attorneys and they said that's not right. The CIA is out of line. And it was a voicemail. So we reported on Phenomenon the entire text of the voicemail that was left by the CIA on John Greenwald's phone on October 30th, I believe it was. And we're talking right now on December 12th, so not too very long ago. And the attorney said that John has appeal rights, so he's gone and done another appeal. Well, this raises the question, as we discussed last week. Why would the CIA be arguing about withholding documents that so far the latest dates on the documents that they have released to John Greenwald's FOIA requests are in the 1970s? So we don't have anything from the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, this decade. And the implication is they're fighting about not releasing documents that would embarrass them. Well, what about what was happening in the 70s, 80s, 90s? And that's why John thinks the program never ended. It probably just changed names, it changed pro words, and that it's ongoing, and that the manipulation of human minds for interrogation and to manipulate amnesia around certain work that is highly sensitive is what our intel agencies have done as a matter of course. Can we prove it? Well, it depends, I guess, on what is in the documents that are still being withheld, and would we receive documents that would be all blacked out? We don't know. And John says he's not going to give up. He said he's going to continue his FOIA requests, and we will see. But you know, the takeaway, I think, from all of this, 1959, official sanction of MKUltra. The head of MKUltra in 1959, in fact, I think it was a little bit earlier, but 59 things were definitely going, was a man named Sidney Gottlieb. He came right out of German Nazis. just like the paperclip program that we had the rocket scientists from Germany go to White Sands Missile Range south of where I live in Albuquerque. They're down in White Sands. They were down there. So you have this period where the people that were coming into the 1950s after the close of World War II in 1945, rocket physicists from the Nazi program, Sidney Gottlieb, who was put in charge of MKULTRA, a program to learn how to control, manipulate human minds and cause artificial amnesia. It was suggested to me at one point when I was investigating MKUltra a few years ago, separate from John Greenwald's huge FOIA effort. It was suggested to me that one of the reasons that the CIA originally wanted to study the control of the human mind was because they knew that they were dealing with alien intelligences that were operating technologies that we called UFOs and they called UFOBs that could move at 90-degree angles at terrific speeds that no human body could have sustained. So, advanced technology and the ability to communicate with human minds through telepathy and through imagery, hieroglyphs, were all the things that men back in the days of the Army and the Air Force, when crafts were coming down in the Roswell region, at least in 47 on, and in Missouri, we think in 1941, much earlier, the people who were involved even in retrieval operations received telepathic communication. Some saw movies in their heads, hieroglyphs. And our government knew right from the beginning they were trying to understand and deal with something that was not human. And all of these different facets all relate to the complexity of this phenomena and a sad truth. For those of you who have been to our Phenomena radio broadcast since 2015, John Burroughs and I co-host Phenomena Radio. John Burroughs has never, ever, in the last nearly 40 years, been able to remember what happened when there was a blast of white light around him in Rendlesham Forest. Jim Penniston was there, and Jim Penniston remembered walking around a black glassy triangle. John Burroughs has been through 7 or 8 hypnosis sessions that I've helped him go to specialists and professionals. And he cannot break through the amnesia. Is it alien-induced amnesia? Is it trauma-induced amnesia from the brain being so shocked that nothing was recorded in John Burroughs' brain? Well, jump over to the issue of John Levine or people who may have had certain talents that military and intel operations may have said, we want you to do X. And then are they given a download that fills something in their minds and they think that they did X when they actually did Z? It's all so complicated. I think that being able to talk with it like we are tonight, I think being able to bring up the questions about what has the government known since the 50s and been trying to experiment with people who came from Germany out of the Nazis to manipulate human minds, that the more we learn, the more we can talk about it, the fairer it is to all of us. If it all has grown out of governments trying to understand what the alien presence is and what they can do to human minds, I understand that too. And I can understand governments, by definition, saying nobody is to know. Nobody is ever to know what we are doing. and then fighting FOIA releases on MKUltra. And then you can say the same thing about non-humans. Who are they? What are they? Where are they from? What do they want with Earth? What do they want with humans? What do they want with the moon? What do they want with Mars? Why can't all of us know what our governments know? If there is anybody listening tonight who may fall into the category of being a military operative, who has information face to face with any of the non-humans that I know our special forces have interacted with in a variety of places and times on Earth, I would like to hear from you. I can say that I respect all confidential requests. And then if there's more information to get to me, we can figure out a way to do it safely. And that this feels to me like a time where if I, as an investigative reporter, as a reporter and editor of earthfiles.com, as a contributor to Ancient Aliens, as a co-host on Phenomena Radio, and my Earth Files YouTube channel, if these various pieces of my professional life can help some of you who may have firsthand information and have felt that you could never tell anybody, try to reach me, because I think that the more we share with each other, the healthier we will be. And Lori, I think we have time for one or two more questions.
Fantastic. So our next question is there any connection between Martian apparitions and UFOs, in your opinion?
What is a Martian apparition?
We'll have to put that out and see if the person who asked the question is still in chat. So we'll go on to the next
All
one.
right.
All right. Good evening, Linda. What do you think of the Bob Lazar documentary recently released? Any thoughts?
Well, may I answer from my own personal face-to-face with Bob Lazar, starting in 1988, when John Lear, Bob Lazar, George Knapp, myself, and some other people would periodically cross paths in Las Vegas or someplace. And I got to know and like those guys. And it was 1990. I was working at CNN. I was working on an environment, like a show about the environment. It was called, we called it Earth, it was Earth Alert or something. And I was a producer, and I got a call in Atlanta at CNN at my office from Bob Lazar. And he said, we're going to be doing something on Memorial Day here. If you can get here, we'd like to have you come and be part of the festivities, and we can talk about, by then it had been very controversial, about whether or not Bob Lazar with John Lear, had Bob Lazar been telling the truth about going to Area 51, working for EG&G, all of that. So I went to Las Vegas, met with all of those guys, and was able to spend a lot of time on that Memorial Day weekend, and I believe it was 1990. And here is the moment of talking with Bob Lazar that is indelible in my mind. He was showing me in his kitchen how he ran this film for the real estate offices that he worked for, filming houses. And he was in the process of demonstrating how he was doing that, just to show me that this is what he did. And he had told me that when Stanton Friedman had questioned him about the fact that he had no degree from MIT, he said, I never ever said I had a degree from MIT or anything like that. What happened, Linda, is I'm an adopted child, and my parents lived in Florida, and they didn't make much money. And I had gone to school with some buddies. We liked electrical things. We liked engineering. We liked taking cars apart. And some of my buddies got accepted to MIT. He said, I drove up to see them as my friends. And I went to one of their classes for a few days. He would just go and sit. And he said, and I learned some things. I became even more interested in having some kind of a career in which I would be dealing with electronic and engineering things. And he said, that's what I learned at MIT. I never told anybody I had a degree. That's Bob's firsthand version to me. And he started talking about, I did meet Edward Teller. And I did ask Edward Teller if there was any way I could get work out in a capacity where there were UFOs, and that we just had a discussion about it, quite frankly. And he said, that's how I ended up getting this assignment through EG&G and going to Area 51 and going down underneath. He said they had the craft that he went to was propped up somehow so that you couldn't just walk around. They kept everybody very, very compartmentalized. And that Lazar was able to get down underneath a craft. And he said there were other engineers inside this craft, and they were doing various things. And that he said that's when I am introduced to this concept of an element 115 and neutralizing gravity and all of this stuff. And back at that point, when there was so much evolving beginning controversy about whether Bob Lazar was telling the truth, and counterintelligence would not want anybody to believe that Bob Lazar was telling the truth, and therefore there would be all efforts by the government to discredit him, and that's why he thinks that prostitution, that he was doing accounting for a house of prostitution. He thinks that's why that charge came up when the county where the house of prostitution was supposed to be, prostitution was supposed to be legal. So he felt that everything was trumped up and trying to hurt him, and that's one of the reasons why eventually he left Nevada and went into a very off-the-grid, not being involved, except for later on, recently, with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp and doing that documentary. And the part that I remember hearing him talk to me with emotion was when he said, Linda, I know that I went to the McCarran airport, and I know that I was shown these books, and he described to me one that was about another civilization that was not human. And he described some of the things that he remembered and said, but I still can see, I think I'm in the McCarran airport. I think I'm waiting for a plane. And he said, and it seems to me that there's books in front of me, but somebody in a lab coat comes in and they do something with a needle into my arm, and they tell me to drink something that was green colored, and it smelled to me like pine sol. And then I don't know what happened. And it was Bob Lazar trying to say that he honestly was confused himself about what John Burroughs, Peniston, maybe Levine, others. Where does conscious, alert memory stop and start, and manipulated blank spots, amnesia, overlays, experiences like putting movies in people's heads that they didn't really live, but they are put in so that it will block out something else. And that's why this is so complicated again. It's why it is a 16-layer chess game, and you can't tell the players without technology, because none of us know what exactly has happened to Bob Lazar's mind from outside forces, or to John Burroughs, to all these others. And that, from my point of view, Bob Lazar was always trying to tell the truth. I found him to be a person that you would put into that category of somebody who would be almost cranky or irritated, and that he would tell you the truth. Sarcastic, he would tell you the truth. That, to me, is the Bob Lazar that I knew. How about one more, Lori?
You got it. So I did get some clarification, and it was my fault. The question was, is there any connection between Marian apparition, which is a supernatural appearance by Virgin Mary? So that was my fault. I read the question incorrectly. So
yeah, okay.
Is there a connection between those apparitions and UFOs, in your opinion?
I think so. And the reason I hesitate a little bit, I was in Medjugorje in 1987 when the children there said that they were seeing the Virgin Mary come to them in the church. I had been in Stonehenge in England. I was, this is before crop formations. I had wanted to go to Stonehenge and had a trip. And when I was at Stonehenge, the whole series of circumstances happened that allowed me to even consider going to what was then the Yugoslavia area, to go to Medjugorje. And I did it on a spur of the moment. And therefore, what I'm going to describe is that what happened in the 48 hours that I was in Medjugorje and at the church, and went with people up on the high mountain where there was a cross. It was one extraordinary spiritual, soul-affecting event after another. I don't think in my life that I've ever been any place that had so many things happening at so many levels that seemed to be almost theatrical than Medjugorje in 1987, the harmonic convergence. And the very fact that I was there, plunked from Stonehenge and taken there, is also strange. But what the discussion that I had with one of the Catholic priests on one of the evenings, standing with hundreds of people and seeing their faces as they were waiting for there to be a candle and a light in the church, which would mean that the Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary, was in, that's what the children said, that they would light the candle would come on if the Virgin Mary was there. And the light from the candle was there twice each night that I was there. And that's what led to a discussion with the priest. And he said, I've been in there with the children. And he said, you can see a change. It is as if their faces glow. And I can't see anything. It's the priest with the white collar and black. I can't see anything. But I see the glow on the children's faces. And they are talking to the Virgin Mary. Okay, now shift that back to Fatima, 1917, 1918. Children were describing seeing the Virgin Mary come in over a tree, and it went for that period of time up into October of that year when there was the miracle. And modern day investigators say, of course, the sun, a circle of light, the sun itself, astronomical, didn't come down into the earth at Fatima. But something created the illusion, and not everybody saw it. All of this drama of the sun moving out of the sky and coming right down to where the children were, and then all of the changes in the light, it wasn't universally shared. So if you take Fatima, if you take Medjugorje, I had my own incredible experience up on a mountain in Medjugorje, surrounded by maybe 50 people. And I felt something that was electric happen. I felt like I was suddenly in a zone that was making the pressure in my chest, like my soul was responding to something. But I didn't see anything with my eyes. But what happened to these 50 people on the mountain with me? They start gasping, "Look!" And hands and arms. It was men, it was children, mothers. And they're all pointing. And I'm feeling something extraordinary. I can't see anything. What is the one phenomenon that over the 20th to the 21st century that we know can selectively have people on a freeway, 100 cars, and maybe only one family is seeing an orange glowing light in the sky and nobody else is? It's the UFO phenomenon. The selective manipulation of human minds. Does that make the spiritual link to the Mother Mary suspect? Not for me. Whatever we are dealing with, the fact that there have been miracles that have been described and sketched on this planet going all the way back to Samaria 5,000 years. If we are dealing with we'll call it a braid, that they are ancient aliens, like the TV show I do, that there are ancient astronauts, as Eric von Daniken has written about, that there are ancient other civilizations that have come and used our solar system and our planet and our moon, and that all of it is true, that does not in any way exclude what even some of these advanced intelligences have communicated during human abductions. That there is a force. I call it a divine field. To some of the abductees, some of the non-humans have referred to it, from their point of view, as the life force of the universe. And that any life in this matter world, any life in our matter universe, only exists because there is this greater energy, this greater consciousness, this greater divine field, this greater force. If that force is responsible for manipulating matter events in this universe because it wants to test something, shove souls forward, do something, then in a way, whether it's Fatima or Medjugorje, that mountain where I was, and not everybody is seeing the same thing. In all of those events, what was the residue? It was men, women, and children who were Homo sapiens sapien, who left those events convinced they have a soul, and that something cares about that soul, and that life goes on after the body dies. It's on that ground that right now, in December of 2018, a certain percentage of the human population is going to celebrate the birth of an avatar on this planet who said, "He who believeth in him who sent me shall have everlasting life." And it's as if the corollary to that is, "He who does not believe in him who sent me shall not have everlasting life." Maybe that's the fundamental political argument in this universe. Maybe there are forces in conflict over that issue. Eternal life versus non-eternal life. And what makes up the ingredients that would give any life form either one? That's a big mystery. Perhaps what's going to happen next, I hope so, we will finally have that handshake with the allies out there in the cosmos, one or more groups that actually care about us, care about life, and want us to survive our own violence and evolve to join in some kind of cosmic group. Think of the excitement if humanity continues to survive its own violence and actually gets to the moon and to Mars with bases, and finally gets to meet those that are advanced enough that they would be our allies, and that they can neutralize gravity, and they can show us how they built pyramids. How exciting it would be. And on that note, Lori, I'm going to say we're going to do a show next Wednesday, and then we'll be off for Christmas, but that we are in a time in which I just feel that revolution, evolution, and change is about us in all directions, and that I hope all of you who have been coming to the YouTube channel for Earth Files, you not only will you keep coming, try to get a whole bunch of people to come with you so we can keep enlarging this dialogue, because I think it is so important. I love your emails. I love your questions. I love to know that there's a huge group of us that are really trying to understand the truth, just like my t-shirt. Linda fights for truth, down with entropy, up with light, and happy holidays.
Thanks, Linda.